शिरोदिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते भगवति हेशिति कण्ठकुटुम्बिनि भूरि कुटुम्बिनि भूरि कृते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते सुरवरवर्षिणि दुर्धरदर्शिनि दुर्मुखमर्षिनि हर्षरते त्रिभुवनपोषिणि शङ्करतोषिणि किल्बिषमोषिनि घोषरते धनुजनि रोषिनि दितिशुकरोषिनि दुर्मथतोषिनि सिन्धुषुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. I hope the audio is coming fine. We'll go through this cute little paper I found today on a very, very interesting topic, on a very relevant topic that we discuss almost all the time from our channel by someone called Dr. Suchismita Das. And the name of the paper is The Demand for Industry, Oscillation of the Agrarian Question in Rural West Bengal. That's academic language, which I simplified to meaning basically the dilemma of the people of Bengal and especially the people of villages, that whether we really want industry or not. But my video title also sounds a bit like a fantasy Harry Potter novel, of course, Harry Potter and the Dilemma of Industry, something like that. But we'll have to do this quickly today, and it's a very short paper. It's a 12-page paper, but I have found some interesting findings in this paper. But more fascinatingly, at 7:30, I'm coming back live again with Mysterious Sociologist in a different stream. Okay, so let's start this paper. Namaste Navvimarsh, hello Tatvik, hello Adibhan. So let's see. So the abstract of the paper says the movement against land acquisition for industrialization in Singur 2006 through 2008 became emblematic of the defeat of CPIM in West Bengal, the longest democratically elected communist regime in the world. A decade later, in 2018, CPIM organized a farmers' rally from Singur demanding industrialization and jobs. This article engages with this narrative of quote-unquote demand for industrialization and asks why farmers who had opposed land acquisition for industry a decade ago have started supporting industry now. Amid an ongoing wave of political change, the demand for industry emerges as a hope for the future rising from its own ashes. This article also engages with the classical agrarian question to argue that today the transition to industrialization occurs not due to agricultural surplus but due to agricultural economic insecurities. This article critically explores the relationship between industrialization and agricultural productivity. Introduction. The state of West Bengal. Oh, I said West Bengal. Lol. Hi Abir from Bangladesh. Dada, हम ईश्वर के कृपा से बचे हुए हैं. Yes. Hold on now. And I heard that हाँ आ गए हाँ ऑडियो गॉन वीडियो गॉन सब चला गया था. तो आई थिंक द नेट इज नॉट कम्प्लीटली बैक एज ऑफ येट. मुझे थोड़ा स्लो वहाँ पे वाईफाई का सिग्नल दिखाई दे रहा है स्ट्रीम यार्ड पे. तो यस, आई हर्ड दैट चिन्मय दास ब्रह्मचारी गॉट फायर्ड फ्रॉम इस्कॉन. सो लेट्स सी व्हाट हैपेंस नाउ टू इस्कॉन and चिन्मय दास. Yeah, the net seems fine now. Okay, let's start then. The state of West Bengal in India has had the longest democratically elected communist regime in the world under CPIM. This era was marked by agrarian mobilizations and deindustrialization. Subsequently, the next incumbent, TMC, also reaped the wave of anti industry mobilization by farmers in Singur in 2006 through 2008, uh, which was supported by RSS and BJP, at least RSS as far as I remember. These farmers resisted the establishment of the Motors Limited TML factory on their land. This resistance became emblematic of CPIM's defeat and made Singur internationally prominent. However, a decade after TMC's incumbency, various sections of people in Singur express a need for industry and regret their past actions. गलती हो गई আমাদের ভুল হয়েছিল. This article assesses the transformation in economic orientations of the people of rural West Bengal, particularly Singur, over the past decade. Now they want capitalism, the evils of capitalism, tracing their current affinity for industrialization and economic development, contrary to their resistance against industry a decade ago. So you see, they are never consenting to things fully functionally, with full agency. It's always whoever holds the narrative power, who explains to them that this is good for you, this is bad for you. There's nothing more or less than that. This article also evaluates the classical agrarian question to weigh its contemporary relevance. And the problem is that the people who explain to them that this is good for you, this is bad for you, etc., Thomas Sowell would call them the third party non-stakeholders who are making the decisions or protests on their behalf and stuff. But you see, because that class remains, because that class goes on doing this, therefore we are not even arriving at a situation where our rural villagers, village folk, who of course are touted by Hindutwadis or Edenist Hindutwadis as more intelligent than city folk, etc., more shrewd than city folk, etc., or more close to their roots, etc. Of course, all these things can be true, and this fact also can be true that they are insanely gullible to the mainstream city folk narratives, of course. Otherwise, how is this happening? So the better option we hope one day happens is that these third party non-stakeholders are either not given a crap about in the villages, or those third party non-stakeholders are shamed into not giving their bullshit advice on people who are actual stakeholders. And then will come a situation where these people will bargain with Tata or companies like Tata on their own, and think of their gains and losses from selling or not wanting to sell the land in the first place. This article also evaluates the classical agrarian question to weigh its contemporary relevance. So, the audio is back. So, Singur's trajectory gives a hitherto unexplored dimension to the Marxist agrarian question of transition from feudalism to capitalism. This transition could occur through primitive accumulation, metamorphosis of pre-capitalist land property, class differentiation, and land reform. In Singur, instead of a unilinear transition, we find an oscillation. We find an oscillation between resistance against industry and demand for industry. It's because the people with the narrative are doing the oscillation. It's not really the people who are doing the oscillation, according to me. It's the third party non-stakeholders who are saying that industry is good when all of their children are in Bangalore, and it's those third party non-stakeholders who are saying that industry is bad up until the time when they and their children have the jobs in fucking West Bengal. Theorizations on the agrarian question have not resolved its essential distance from the reality of peasantry. This article tries to bridge the gap between unresolved aspects of these theorizations and the reality of peasantry in West Bengal through a qualitative fieldwork. It also reveals how West Bengal's unique communist history and subsequent neoliberal policies influence people's current orientations. This article empirically investigates the process of agrarian transition and resistance, theorized by generations of Marxist scholars. It studies James Scott's concept of the moral economy and the dynamism in the peasantry of rural West Bengal. It reveals changes in orientations towards industry among farmers, disillusionment among erstwhile protesters, and challenges the agrarian question by revealing the demand for industrialization embodied by the rural populace, all of which could have been predicted accurately by a fucking 12-year-old libertarian. The next section assesses this quote-unquote demand for industry in Singur, which persisted under varying conditions over the past decade. the contradictory integration of the demand for industry. Even at the zenith of the Shingu resistance, the demand for industrialization was surreptitiously woven into the narrative. All protesters were careful not to appear anti industry. Yes, we are not anti industry, we just want this industry. We are not against capitalism, we are just against crony capitalism. We are not against socialism. We are not against socialism, we just hate socialists with green hair. And we need Sanatan socialism. A decade later, this peculiar position continues. CPIM has lost its electoral relevance, but the demand for industrialization, with which it had campaigned in 2006, has revived across the state. And to be truthful, therefore, CPIM does have a pro-industry image these days in West Bengal. That you see, we were the guys, we were the capitalism guys. Even farmers who opposed industrialization a decade ago now prefer industry on the Tata field. But you see, it's still going to be tough to trust them because of the new crop of commies. That's the problem. You see, if it was still the hypothetical Buddhadev Agarwal people alive to this day who had faced the brunt of not being able to run a state properly because of deindustrializing, if those people were in power today, I could have some faith on them. But the new crop of commies who are basically in the same toolkit gang of international far left politics, especially in the realm of cultural leftist politics, when they come to power, and even if they say that we are going to do industrialization, these people have not faced the brunt of failing with their policies, right? So they are going to try exact those same shenanigans again. If they restart the Tata factory, they are going to destroy it with their union bazi once again. The demand for industrialization, which for farmers is a demand for market for agricultural produce, is brimming with political potential, waiting to be harnessed by political parties seeking legitimacy in Shingur. This is significant because the resistance of 2006 through 2008 was against industrialization. The Tata factory had already been constructed in Shingur by the time the resistance against it gained momentum. Therefore, when the Tata group left Shingur, construction debris rendered the land infertile. It was always going to be infertile from the very beginning, the moment cement was put into it. And that had been sort of a counter argument by CPIM and CPIM supporters in that era, that why are you bothering about kicking Tata away now? Why are you going on saying that agriculture is going to return to this land now? It's not going to ever happen on this land ever again. Unskilled sharecroppers today prefer industry there since it is uncultivable. Oh, they just realized it's uncultivable 8 years later. Oh, 12 years later, right? Or eight how many years? 2006, 2016. A lot of years later. We now realize it's uncultivable. We didn't understand it was going to be uncultivable back then. Yeah, makes sense because they are so rooted to their village street smartness that they didn't realize what's cultivable and what's not cultivable. And the education system of West Bengal is also very awesome. So they were taught in schools that even a cemented land is going to be cultivable. Had the land been fertile, sharecroppers would have preferred to cultivate it. They view industry as economically beneficial since it creates a market for their produce and boosts their income. But particularly for the Tata land, their demand for industry is due to its infertility. But also, Annadatas will go to processions demanding no change in farmer laws. Due to deindustrialization during the communist era, unemployment increased across the state, creating a need for income and industrialization. Regardless of the agricultural incomes, people now see TML's departure, Tata Factory's departure from Shingur as a lost potential, leading to a demand for industry in the aftermath of the resistance. The infertility of the Tata land contributed to this already existing demand. Even those who remain in agriculture are not averse to industry. They see the two sectors as complementary. Since income, Krishi amader bhitti shilpo amader bhobishot was obvious then. Since income from agriculture is both insufficient and unstable in West Bengal, people believe industry would supplement agricultural income. Again, things that could have been predicted by a 12-year-old libertarian in 2006. Repeasantization is considered undesirable because agriculture in West Bengal is unprofitable despite high yield, since agrarian capitalism requires growth of market alongside production. But peasants are frustrated due to poor infrastructure and lack of access to markets. You see, our government babus preventing the evil hand of evil capitalists from the innocent on the tops of heads of innocent little cute Bengalis. This article can also be a precursor to investigate the demand for industry in other agricultural societies which experience stagnation and shift towards non-agricultural jobs. ओके 3 regimes of West Bengal. उससे पहले ना मुझे एक काम करने दो, मेरा स्ट्रीम यार्ड थोड़ा हैंग हो गया है. Let me just open it from a different tab as well. Oh, it's working now. Nice. Let's see some comments since I'm starting a new subchapter currently, but moving rapidly in another direction. Freebies and subsidies, loan mafi, fees mafi done by BJP in Maharashtra to get the win. AA, agreed. Yes, you are sometimes very harsh and rude to me and our viewers, but occasionally you come up with brilliant observations and points. That's why I have no hatred for you. Kerala also assigned the same deal with Adani regarding something but can't resolve land. The reduced quality of cotton to be included for MSP, 12% moisture for 15%. Okay. Regimes of West Bengal. From the mid 1960s, CPIM cadres built networks among the rural electorate through political mobilizations, which reinforced their relevance. These mobilizations helped to implement land and tenancy reforms. CPIM reduced the land ceiling from 25 acres to 12.3 acres for irrigated land and 17.3 acres for non-irrigated land, and redistributed the ceiling surplus land. Oh, nice. CPIM conducted Operation Burga to register sharecroppers, giving them permanent tenancy, protection from eviction, and right to 75% of the produce, and of course, therefore solidifying their caste in a way that for generations now you have to become farmers only. However, these reforms were implemented unevenly, lol, and CPIM was careful not to alienate the rural elite, thus oscillating between reforms and their lukewarm implementations. ठीक है, ये है basis of socialism forever and ever. ये है basis of sentimentalism in policy making. हमेशा हमेशा के लिए एक एक ऐसा कुछ मतलब घाव दो अपने आप को जो कि हील ना हो, और पहले घाव दो जबकि आसपास सब बोल रहे हैं कि घाव मत दो भोसड़ी के, फिर घाव दो और उसके बाद उसका उसका ऑपरेशन ना करके, उसका प्रॉपर हीलिंग ना करके, उसके ऊपर बैंडेड के ऊपर बैंडेड के ऊपर बैंडेड लगाते जाओ हमेशा हमेशा के लिए. These imperfect implementations created unregistered sharecroppers who, armed with discourse of peasant politics, were at the forefront of the protest against CPIM in Singur. So they were a monster that were created by CPIM themselves. CPIM promoted militant hostility against private industries and refused to reinvigorate public sector units. Leftist unions organized workers against industries, causing lockouts and unemployment. Such unemployment, coupled with declining profitability of agriculture, compelled younger generations to emigrate for jobs. Oh, people leave West Bengal for jobs. People don't like the Bengali language so much that they'll stay here forever. How the fuck? While CPIM's new industrial policy, NIP 1994, attempted productive changes, it came too late, and CPIM's hurried attempt at land acquisition for industrialization in Singur led to the protests. This is Nielsen, okay? This is that Viking descendant Nielsen. These protests gained international significance because they were a rare example of successful political resistance against CPIM in over 3 decades. The Singur protesters raised the issues of insufficient compensation and negotiation, refusal to forego fertile multi-crop land, after, of course, it has been turned non-fertile, coercion in the acquisition process, as if this was the first time they were coerced into anything fucking good or bad in the state, and so on. Again, said by the Viking descendant. Nielsen, 2010. To resist the acquisition, protesters formed the SKJRC. Though urban protesters opposed neoliberal industrial development, the dispossessed farmers and TMC leadership, who resonated most with the farmers, did not oppose neoliberalism but rather demanded a better negotiated compensation package. सिर्फ इतना ही तो चाहिए था. The landless, unregistered sharecroppers resisted this acquisition, for it was making them vulnerable to destitution. That's why the slogan said, "Go back, Tata," because they just wanted a better deal. Eventually, the protests cultivated a formidable political opposition, which took precedence over agrarian issues, thus bringing political change. Okay, I made a mistake. I was supposed to read this spot, I think. Did I read this section? A decade later, in a symbolic effort to undo its fate, CPIM organized farmers' rally from Singur, lol, demanding industry and jobs. This is unusual because most farmers' rallies in India demand loan waivers, MSP, and not industrialization and jobs. And because CPIM itself had decelerated industries and jobs. Considering that a decade ago, farmers in Singur had opposed land acquisition for industrialization, this demand for industrialization in a farmers' rally warrants inquiry. The next section studies the relationship between agrarian classes and industrialization to understand the context of demand for industry. So we are in 3. Yes, so 3 has ended, I guess. Or did we just read the last part of 3? I don't know. But nice paper from this scholar called Dr. Suchismita Das. Why aren't we talking about the ISKCON priest arrest and Hindu protest in Kolkata? What exactly is there to talk about it? I posted the informations, of course. Uh, you mistake between information and research analysis. Yes, bad things are happening to ISKCON in Bangladesh, and there are protests going on in Kolkata. Next. The implications, of course, will be discussed in the 7:30 podcast. Agrarian classes and industry, existing debates. The Singur protests generated considerable literature on peasantry, CPIM's failures, and neoliberalism. The category of peasantry challenges both Marxists and neoclassical thinkers in their attempt to reconcile the persistence and assimilation of peasants in advanced capitalist economies. Marx theorized the peasantry as an atomized class, isolated from forms of poverty, market, and capitalist production. Lenin and Trotsky viewed differentiation of division of labor among small peasants as the route to capitalist economy. Lenin viewed peasantry as a part of the capitalist economy due to its capitalist relations of productions. Shayanov believed capital-intensive family farms can enable development. He described family farms as landowning, consumption-oriented, and sustained by family labor. Conflating tribal and modern cultivators, Alfred Kroeber defined peasants as part societies since they produced rurally but distributed in cities, thus forming parts of both. Raymond Firth identified small-scale, self-sufficient communitarian production processes as the basis of peasant economy. Firth explored peasant-non-peasant relationships, price arrangements in local markets, and their economic influence on peasants constrained by scarcity, a concept lost on commies. George Dalton viewed peasantry as integrated with the world capitalist market. He categorized 3 types of peasant economy: subsistence, peripheral market, and market dominant. Eric Wolff studied asymmetries of peasant-non-peasant relationships, viewing peasants as marginalized in competition with large industries, enabling surplus extraction through world markets. His typology of peasants reveals peasants who produce for subsistence with minimal surplus, peasants who produce 50% for market, and also peasants who produce 90% cash crops for market. This article explores the relationship between peasantry and industry, which goes beyond exploitation of these dichotomies and enhances complementarity. Adivani saying, Dada, tomaro rantaker dose mone hocche beshi hoyeche. Wrong time T. And enhances complementarity. Goran Zurfel's engagement with the agrarian question revealed that, unlike Marx's predictions, capital accumulation in agriculture engendered not revolutions but rather the rise of middle peasants who coped with foreign competition using kin solidarity and tenant labor. Robert Redfield viewed peasantry as a stage in the evolution from tribe to city, lacking profit motive, remaining aloof from the market, prioritizing agriculture as sacred and commerce as secondary. Anti-chromatism. Redfield's cultural definition of peasantry ignores economic transactions, limiting peasantry in a static past, bereft of profit-making intentions in the modern economy, because of which we can't survive in this current system. Zurfel's assertion that family farms lack profit motive similarly limits a section of the peasantry. Timothy Mitchell has criticized similar fossilization of peasantry by Henry Eyraud and Richard Critchfield. Contrarily, this article gives the dynamic role of peasant agency a new dimension, locating it not only in the success of peasant resistance in state politics but also in the aftermath of the upheavals, which include deliberated reorientations of the peasantry, reorientations for the peasantry. The view that peasants are an anachronism or a disappearing phenomenon under industrial capitalism is Eurocentric and statist. It is challenged by the continued existence of peasantry in countries across the spectrum of development. Both neoliberal theories and Marxist historical materialism claim the unilinear transition from feudal agriculture to industrial capitalism, causing peasant dispossession. However, in reality, the two modes of production coexist rather than one succeeding the other. Yes, what the fuck are we going to eat? Peasant mobilizations like Via Campesina resist both capitalism and socialism to preserve peasantry, while the US used repeasantization to counter such mobilizations. It led to depeasantizations in developing countries by undercutting local markets through cheap exports and food dumping. Via Campesina has reframed the agrarian question by prioritizing ecological sustainability over accumulation imperative and resisting this international politics of food dumping, thus shifting the question from transition to ecological sustainability. The demand for industry in West Bengal diverts from both the classical agrarian question of transition and this revised agrarian question of ecology. Having been deprived of scope for wealth accumulation for decades, the demand for industrialization in West Bengal reflects a prioritization of the need for income, where allegedly poor are becoming poorer and there's rising income inequality in the rest of the country. This demand does not reflect the Marxist transition, nor a lack of ecological consciousness, but a hope for income supplementation by expanding their agricultural market through influx of a new population. Deindustrialization in West Bengal was accompanied by ubiquitous presence of CPIM in social, remember, very important that it was there in social life as well as administrative life, of course, which enabled corruption and decelerated infrastructural development. This path dependency made people lose faith in the government. But people in the Hindutva socialist circles have, of course, still not lost faith in the government because they think they have their guy in the power who's going to forever remain in power. And no matter how much he changes laws or centralizes power, it's not going to be misused once he's out of office. Since the 1980s in West Bengal, industries recruited primarily contractual labor since both industrialists and unionists could control them. Thus, employment was insecure. Further, CPIM had not created a land bank despite its long regime. And when it tried to industrialize Singur, its coercive land acquisition incited protests. Of course, not organically. Agriculturalists in West Bengal have a multifaceted approach towards industrialization. While the need for industry is widely expressed, land acquisition causes controversies. People hope to benefit from industrialization without sacrificing their agricultural land. Due to lack of a land bank in West Bengal, ongoing land acquisition conflicts make the state oscillate between coercion and negotiation. The history of industrial, only because there are countless third-party non-stakeholders going on fucking up the conversations and the debates and the negotiations. That's the main problem. Let me see Rudhwaj's comments here. They might be interesting. I come from an industrialist family from Gujarat, so I think I can chime in. Kolkata was murdered and needs to be reborn for revival of manufacturing in West Bengal. CPM needs to go. BJP with policy stability. A city with financial stability and less of a socialist state will provide a good ground zero to grow. West Bengal has a good geography for energy projects along with ports. My whole family is connected to BJP Gujarat and Congress and fund RSS initiatives. RSS initiatives, particularly in Karnataka. Now, Ruthvaj, we'd like to have you say these things in the 7:30 conversation as well, okay? Because we will have something to add to this and a bit of counters as well, okay? About how you think West Bengal might pan out in that context, okay? Try to come join us in that discussion as well with Mr. Sociologist. So, the history of industrialization in India is not uniform. Thus, an informed engagement with the demand for industry must explore the reality of industrial failures too. Industrial endeavors do not compulsorily engender prosperity everywhere and could also incur losses. Of course, without reading the rest of the paper, I'm going to give my 2, 3, 4 cents, okay? Based on some common sense and normal occurrences. A lot of industries are favored via corruption by some corrupt babus, and competition that could have kept those industries in check are prevented, and then therefore that industry goes about doing random things that lead to it closing down. Okay, there's one aspect. The second aspect is, when a business or industry does incur losses, it's not like no one ever makes any mistake ever. Okay, so just like any person, any community, and any living being can make a mistake, even industries make mistakes knowingly or unknowingly, and they incur losses. Okay, the problem is, because of India's laws up until this point, where starting a business was mind fuckingly tough to begin with, and up until like last 1 or 2 years, closing down a business, I hear it's still tough, has also been an absolute bitch of a process. So you see, the problem is not that industrialists or industry has not always been prosperous. The problem is that when they have not been prosperous, they have not been able to close their businesses down immediately and start a new business or invest in something else. That is the main problem, which has also, of course, been prevented by babus and socialists. So California, a small commie state, GDP bigger than India. Okay, easiest place to shut down a business. You are making some mistake, you think you are incurring some losses. Okay, close it down right now, start a new business. Because think of this from the POV of the businessman. What is he going to do if he incurs losses? Either he's going to run to a different country because he can't pay back anyone here, etc., or he's going to spend the rest of his life trying to close the business or trying to rejuvenate the business, all these resources that he spends on doing these two fucking idiotic things could have been spent on starting a new business, which he's not allowed to do because his business is not even closing down in the first place, the loss-making business. Diffusionist theories that attribute okay, while there is a demand for industry in rural West Bengal, the entrepreneurial capacity of local people is limited to small businesses that joining the industry. They depend on external. Yes, of course. Now the Bengalis are too poor to invest in any of this, of course. Unless we're not talking about Bengalis. Diffusionist theories that attribute all economic development to large-scale industry neglect the role of rural-urban relations, colonial state, world economy, social classes, and small-scale industries. Fair enough. We can have a conversation about small businesses as well. When small businesses die, it's usually because of corrupt babus unfairly favoring large businesses because of kickbacks or of holiday in foreign nice lands, or getting their kids education in foreign lands as well. Because of course we can't have great education here. Diffusionist theories that attribute all economic development to large-scale industry neglect the role of rural-urban relations, colonial state, world economy, social classes, and small-scale industries in engendering economic development. The people demanding, see, who were the biggest most significant groups of people demanding hardcore tooth and nail lockdowns? Fucking commies. Who did those lockdowns benefit the most? Amazon. Who got killed? Small business owners. $15 minimum wage in USA. Who advocates for it? Commies and Jeff Bezos. Who faces the brunt of it? Small businesses. So if we really have to care about small businesses, it's us pro-free market guys, libertarians, who have to do it. Socialists will pay lip service to it and fuck up the entire process again. So any commie who says that I am not in favor, I am in favor of capitalism, but I'm not in favor of crony capitalism. I am in favor of businesses, but not in favor of big businesses. They're lying out of their teeth. Okay, they want to fuck everything up. So the people demanding industrialization in Singur also view large-scale industry as the scope for both jabs and small business, since alternative opportunities are scarce. The success or failure of industry depends also on structural factors like state support, institutionalized capital, past successes which attract capital, trade patterns, and labor reactions. 1985's paper. Don't know how seriously we are supposed to take this line, of course. These factors stabilize industry, making the demand for it sustainable. These factors stabilize industry, making the demand for it sustainable. Historically, labor moving out of agriculture or a declining industry. Okay, someone's calling me up, whose phone I'm not going to take. Historically, labor moving out of agriculture or a declining industry is common. In the 1900s, unprofitability of agriculture pushed labor to other sectors like coal, tea, or jute. And the rise of factory-produced goods in colonial England, aided by the colonial state and industrial revolution, undercut Indian handloom industries and English cotton spinners' jobs, causing unemployment. Now, what does Sanjeev Sanyal keep pointing about? One thing, okay. Um, okay, that last comment destroyed my train of thought. But anyway, Sandeep Sanal repeatedly points this out in different podcasts that he wishes that the entire space on the banks of the Ganga in Kolkata is filled with factories which are non-functional but are not allowed to be closed down. He wishes that factory closing down laws get easier and they close down and other factories come up there. So you see, that's the problem we are discussing here. Those are mainly jute mill factories, okay, jute mills basically, which of course closed down because of uh, unfair wages and unions who decided that the fares are unfair. I mean the wages are unfair. But when repeated lockdowns made those factories go into huge losses, they couldn't even close down those factories and start a new factory elsewhere. Even they're spending their lifetimes and all their money in fighting cases here, or just maintaining that, or maintaining or not maintaining that waste of a space which they had of course taken on lease, or had rented the or rent or taken some loan to buy that space where that now defunct factory lies in. So the losses from beginning to end are being created by commies. Parthopi is saying, why are we talking about USA? US government is the biggest employer, hence communist. Uh, oh, the second sentence may as well be true, but the first sentence is that because it's important to learn from stupidity. मुलायम सिंह का बेटा 5 करोड़ का लैम्बोर्गिनी. आई हर्ड दैट उसका तो 1200 या 12,000 रुपए का साइकिल भी है अखिलेश का. हिस्टोरिकली हाँ ये हो गया. तो कॉजिंग अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. हिस्टोरिकली देयरफॉर agriculture and industrial capitalism have coexisted simultaneously rather than on a unilinear scale, and industrialization was not always smooth. Even in Singur, when the Tata Group was training locals for potential employment, they did not guarantee jobs. Of course, I'm training you. I'm just educating you. I don't know if you'll be educated enough to work for me or not. फ्री का एजुकेशन मिल रहा है, थोड़ा दिमाग अच्छा हो रहा है, ले लो, फ्री का मिल रहा है. ट्रेनिंग पीरियड में ही जॉब गारंटी भी चाहिए. सी, इक्वालिटी ऑफ आउटकम्स नॉट इक्वालिटी ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी. तुम लोगों को स्किल के बेसिस पे कोई जेंडर वेंडर ना देख के हम तुमको नौकरी दे सकते हैं. इफ यू हैव द स्किल्स, उससे नहीं होगा. हम सीखने आ रहे हैं, भोसरी के आप नौकरी भी दो. ओके, गिटार सीखने जाओ, यू आर सपोज टू गेट द गारंटी दैट यू विल बी अ ग्रेट गिटारिस्ट और अ फेमस गिटारिस्ट. You start learning synthesizer, you are supposed to be guaranteed by your synthesizer player that you will be a great composer one day. That sort of idiocy does not work in the music industry. That's why India still goes on creating good music, okay? Because communists and socialists don't run the music industry. Thus, the relationship between agrarian classes and industry involves fluctuations and negotiations rather than unilinear transition. The next section engages with the agrarian question to understand how Shingur's conditions challenge it. The agrarian question and West Bengal. The Marxist agrarian question in the theory of historical materialism prognostically assumes a transition from feudal to capitalist mode of production and transformation of peasants to industrial laborers through the emergence of agrarian capital. Agrarian capitalism was supposed to provide the surplus for growth of industrial capitalism, and agrarian bourgeoisie was to provide the market for non-agricultural commodities. Engels emphasized the political implications of the agrarian question of labor. Kautsky and Lenin studied capitalism's permeation into rural society through industrially manufactured goods, thereby increasing occupational specialization and dependence on market. They believed that the need to generate a surplus aided capitalization of and accumulation in agriculture. Since pre-capitalist modes of agrarian production continued to exist in modern capitalist societies, socialist parties were baffled about how to capture power among politically apathetic farmers, thus focusing on sections of peasantry that could be transformed to the socialist phase. However, the peasantry did not engender socialist transformation because peasantry is not monolithic. Lo and behold, peasantry seeks to preserve their private property rather than abolish it, and locates exploitation in rural-urban divide rather than class divide. यही तो मजा है कि जो कि किसी कॉमी को भोसड़ी के पहले से समझ में नहीं आता है, होने के बाद बोलते हैं. तो रिमेंबर इन सोवियत यूनियन, तो you are a farmer who has one cow, you save up, get another cow, and to just expand your business, you immediately get shot dead because you are now trying to make surplus profit and stuff. इंडस्ट्री कंपनी का ग्रोथ भोसड़ी के, तो गरीब लोगों का क्या होगा? इवन इफ द गरीब लोग बाइज द सेकंड काउ, यू आर गोइंग टू गेट किल्ड. व्हाई? नहीं तो गरीब लोगों का क्या होगा? सो यू सी, द प्रीरेक्विजिट फॉर कम्युनिज्म इज दैट गरीब स्टे गरीब, inherently, implicitly. And if you put it another way, anytime you like a kind of person or a kind of profession, you would like more people of those more such people to exist around you, right? If you like metal, you would like more metal bands to come up, etc. You would like more metal musicians around you if you really like metal musicians as people and stuff. But you see, commies like poor people so much that wherever they go, they fill the place with poor people. You see, that's their love for poor people that goes deep into their veins. Rondre rondre গরিবের জন্য ভালোবাসা লুকিয়ে. Is the OP a commie who is vouching for a communist West Bengal or against it, or just reporting as her own opinion? She's just a scholar who's observing that there's now a shift to a demand for industrialization when there was none a few years back. The transformation to socialist collectivized agriculture required political imposition of capitalist agriculture to generate surplus. Abhay is making a good point here that I would like to clarify, because many people have this concern. Abhay is saying if we appropriate woke crap with capitalism, then it's of no use. Yes. You see, Abhay, two things. One is that we have enough people to counter any BS on social media, right? Today, organically, free of cost. All our massive online debate army is there. So even when there is true free market capitalism here, or more free market capitalism, it's not like we are going to take everything word for word from USA. Someone's going to try to do that. Someone's doing that anyway through academia, paid for us, paid for by us, okay, through academics and babus whose salaries we pay, okay. तो जो तुम prevent करना चाहते हो as a side effect of capitalism, वो वैसे भी हो रहा है. Secondly, अगर आता भी है, हम काउंटर कर सकते हैं. Thirdly, even when woke capitalism happened, it's now going away in a matter of 10-12 years, because after all, it's associated directly with market realities. उन लोगों को बार बार दिख रहा है कि गो ब्रोक चल रहा है. लेकिन यही वोकिज्म जब स्टेट या गवर्नमेंट एंजेंडर करेगा तुम्हारे सोसाइटी में रिजर्वेशन के नाम पे एटसेट्रा, तब भोसड़ी के ये जाएगा भी नहीं, because those ideas, those babus, those professors are insulated from market realities. Rather class divide. Okay. So the transformation to socialist collectivized agriculture required political imposition of capitalist agriculture to generate surplus. While in USSR or China, this theory was executed through policy, in West Bengal, CPIM's hurried industrialization accompanied by a change in chief ministership was pragmatic, done less to adhere by Marxist theory and more to meet the immediate economic needs of the state. Right. Just like 1991 में हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर, फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर का पीठ लग गया था दीवार पे, वैसे ही बुद्धदेव अग्रवाल का भी वही हाल हुआ था. So he had to hurry through the process instead of waking up in the morning and reading, okay, what does the communist manifesto say I should do? Okay, this is what I should do. Okay, let's do that. वैसे नहीं होता, टाइम नहीं था. Contrary to Marxist theory, CPIM did not enable capitalist agriculture, but rather sought to industrialize selected ones. Bernstein and Lersch suggest that the agrarian question has been bypassed in process of capital accumulation, since in India, instead of the transition, agrarian labor is trapped in low productivity work, formal sector jobs are diminishing, agricultural land holdings are shrinking, and yet farmers are unwilling to sell their land for industry. Moreover, agricultural surplus is not building industrial enterprises, as the growth rates of agricultural and non-agricultural sectors are uneven. Bernstein distinguishes between the agrarian question of capital and the agrarian question of labor. Byers has discussed the obstacles to capitalist accumulation in the countryside, which prevent transition, and the changes in rural areas that foster national capitalist development. In India, the coexistence of feudal and capitalist modes of production has been the natural order for centuries, since producers and traders naturally benefit from preserving private property. Rural rentier classes benefit from retaining feudal relations of production and thus resist transition to socialist phase. Thus, the predictions of the agrarian question lacked a natural base, And consequently, every time peasantry has been radically detached from their land to join industrial labor, it was enabled by totalitarian force rather than spontaneous social agreements. The peasantry also lacks a class struggle, as many classes cooperate in it, thus diluting the scope for socialist transformation. Interesting sentence. The peasantry also lacks a class struggle, as many classes cooperate in it, thus diluting the scope for socialist transformation. Lol. Third party negotiators destroying it. Yes, Abhay. Which is why, yeah, again, great point. Which I was saying a few weeks back as well, when someone had asked that uh, what would really happen if the Tata Singur factory had happened. We would be another Tamil Nadu. It would be as anti-Hindu as it is today, but it would be economically progressive. People would not be swimming in black money. There would not be just illegal activities and political gundagardi, etc. Less people would die. That is important. Even if you're a converted Christian, it's nice that you don't die in political violence. But here, the way that Tamil Nadu has ended up that way, उसके लिए जो काउंटर करना है, वो काउंटर थोड़ा बहुत तो हम देख रहे हैं कि सोशल मीडिया की वजह से आ रहा है. These days, J. Deepak, Sanjeev Sanyal, etc. All the non-left voices are very, very powerful and convincing more and more people to think differently, etc. So there would be a counterbalance to that anyway, which wasn't there when Tamil Nadu was progressing, because there was no free market capitalism in the information dissemination sector. Okay, again the problem there also was socialism. Abhi kya hai? There is a bit more of a degree of free market in information dissemination. तो आधा ये monopoly of socialist narratives तो गया गड्ढे में. Secondly, some of it has to be done by the state. State sanction के बिना कुछ चीजें नहीं होते हैं. In terms of academia, I'm talking of course. For that, we have to go on convincing, pleading, begging, or shaming the government into doing it. नहीं तो नहीं होगा. कुछ चीजें एकेडेमिया के अंदर ही होते हैं, उसका ट्रिकल डाउन बाहर होता है. एकेडेमिया के अंदर के बारे में भोजी के कुछ कोई तो सोच ही नहीं रहा है. The peasantry also lacks a class struggle, as many classes cooperate in it, thus diluting the scope for socialist transformation. The new farmers movement of the 1980s challenged the agrarian question by asserting right over their own surplus and locating the exploiters not in landlords but in the state and urban society. Thus, in India, the mode of production debate, the farmers movement of 1980s, and the bypassing of the agrarian question all challenged the agrarian question's theory of unilinear transition. This article critically explores the agrarian question in the context of rural West Bengal, that agrarian capitalist surplus would propel industrial capitalism. Singur shows us that agrarian insecurities and unprofitability generate the demand for industry. Nice. Rather than a transition, there is a demand for coexistence of agriculture and industrial capitalism. And I think this is inevitable. Rather than agricultural surplus enabling industry, the influx of population enabled by industrialization provides a market for agricultural surplus. Thus, surplus by itself is insufficient to enable industrialization. Rather, industrialization makes surplus useful. Industry is expected to supplement agricultural income and provide an alternative employment besides agriculture. Choice to hona chahiye, freedom to hona chahiye. This article uses empirical data to show how fundamental tenets of the agrarian question have reversed today. It shows how today's agrarian reality, particularly in post-communist West Bengal, can offer a hitherto unexplored dimension to the question of transition. The agrarian question becomes one of negotiations between the state, industrial sector and agricultural sector, creating a sphere of interactions, oscillations, aage piche, and reversals, rather than a unilinear tale of transition from feudalism to capitalism. In academic discourse, village society was considered significant, as both nationalist and orientalist perspectives view village society as the authentic indigenous way of life, a favorite idea of Gandhian socialists as well. A microcosm of India in which the peasant is rooted in the traditions, devoid of profit motive, and then goes broke or gets converted. Lol. This imagery relegated the peasant to backward rungs of an evolutionary scale, thereby providing the rationale for colonial intervention. Rationale for another thing. What? The third party non-stakeholder intervention from commies based in cities, not just colonialism, or you can call that colonialism as well. To reevaluate such conclusions and engage with the participants, this article uses ethnography and participant observation. Ethnographic works integrate Indian agriculture with the larger economy. During ethnographic immersion in the field, it is important to be aware of the ripples created by the presence of the researcher herself and to maintain self reflexivity during fieldwork and documenting. This article employs an anthropological methodology of qualitative fieldwork. 34 landowning farmers, 36 sharecroppers, 33 non agrarian residents, and 17 politically active residents of Singur were interviewed. Nice. Remember in this context the paper of Dayabati Roy, okay? We have discussed in our live streams. Since Singur is a politically charged site, the names of the participants have been changed to maintain their safety through anonymity. You see, we prevented evil capitalism, therefore now people have to change their names because of unsafety. However, since media reports on Singur's tumultuous villages already put them in the public light, changing the names of the villages was deemed unnecessary. Fieldwork for this article was conducted in the villages of Gopalnagar West, Bedaberi, Khasherberi or Khosherberi, I don't know, Khasherberi I think, since these were the epicenters of the protests. The next section focuses on the land question since it is linked to agrarian issues and was the bone of contention in Singur. Since pre-capitalist modes of agrarian production continued to exist in modern capitalist societies, socialist parties were baffled about how to capture power among politically apathetic farmers, thus focusing on sections of peasantry that could be ye to ho gaya. Yes, ye section ho gaya. Did I read it wrong? Yeah, I think I read it wrong. Lol. Okay, so we've read this part already. The peasantry also lacks a class struggle. Yes. So anyway, this article critically explores the agrarian question in the context of, oh yeah, I scrolled too much this time. Yes. Yeah, so bone of contention in Singur. Right. I was scrolling wrong right now. So the next section focuses on the land question since it is linked to agrarian issues and was the bone of contention in Singur. The land question and West Bengal. The land question moves into social, legal, and juridical domains which co-constitute each other. In the land question, eminent domain determines the state's right to control private land for a public purpose, generating negotiations between the state and the citizen. Again, ideally, a law that should not remain in the first place because the state has the right to take away your property, but also it won't take away your property if you just gather 200 people to protest on your behalf. If you are a person who does not have connections to gather 200 people, then you are fucked. Otherwise, you are not fucked. So there's a band-aid through 2-3 band-aids for a pointless harm. Okay. Whereas even with that, without that eminent domain bullshit, you could have negotiated with the industry directly. Eminent domain determines the state's right to control private land for a public purpose, generating negotiations between the state and the citizen. State is who? Third party non-stakeholder. Negotiation किसके बीच में होना चाहिए था? Citizen and industry. State और किसके साथ negotiate करेगा? Industry and state and citizen. Middleman है भोसरी के state. पैसा कौन खाएगा? State का बाबू. Evil capitalism से कौन बचाएगा? बाबू. Third party non-stakeholder कौन है? बाबू. एक घाव उसके ऊपर 4 बैंडेड, चलो दौड़ो. वर्षा भगत गांगुली राइट्स, अरे बांग्ला पक्षेर तो कष्ट. Varsha Bhagat Ganguly writes, this land question symbolizes the nature of association with land, agrarian to industrial, as space and urban regional planning change in perspective about land use as a resource for economy, from land as social identity to commodity, and perspective towards development of the country. The market for land was born after land was turned into purchasable private property. Creation of land markets engendered the tussle between the state and the citizens' rights over land and the eminent domain. In Singur, the debate over eminent domain and inadequate compensation by the state became prominent. The land acquired for the Tata factory was bought by the state, but the adjoining land was sold at much higher prices to private buyers. Lo and behold, thus a relative deprivation enveloped this experience for those who had to sell their land for the Tata factory. Exactly the concern I was showing 2 seconds back. It is difficult to determine value of land because it is difficult to integrate social and individual standards, and because modern valuation standards believe that exchange value includes use value, and it is difficult to link price to this double value. It really isn't. Only if you are a commie developmental economist, it's probably difficult. Adam Smith's diamond water paradox also informs this debate. Water is more necessary than diamonds, yet diamonds are more expensive than water. So scarcity is the game. Thus, what determines monetary value is not only use value but scarcity. Oh my god, I know some economics. Need, demand and supply, and clientele capacity. For Smith, value was determined by embodied labor, exchanged labor, convenience, and monetary exchange value. For Ricardo, value is determined by scarcity and costs of obtaining them. Karl Menger says that value is extrinsic and distinct from exchange value. Things gain value when they can be economized through money. Unfortunately, yes. However, money does not truly equate the values of objects being exchanged. Rather, exchange value expressed through price varies situationally depending on negotiations. Fair enough. In the context of pricing land, William Stanley Jevons set the time of land pricing as a crucial factor. The value of land depends on the time at which the value is being determined. This was evidenced in Singur, where land adjoining the Tata factory was sold at skyrocketing prices since it was viewed as an investment opportunity due to industrialization in the area. But Bhosri ke hamara hai sabse affordable city. Whereas the same quality of land in the Tata field was taken at a lower price by the government. Can't do. See the problem with the eminent domain law in the first place. See why libertarianism is better. So the post that I made today in the community tab, where someone's proudly saying that India is Kolkata is the most affordable city, etc. Whereas evil capitalist states have seen 152% growths in their price of everything, etc. 132% growth, etc. ये है चुतिया आर्ग्यूमेंट्स इंसुलेटेड फ्रॉम मार्केट रियलिटीज. अफोर्डेबल है तो भोसरी के कोई आ रहा है यहाँ पे काम करने के लिए या नौकरी करने के लिए? Yes, people who come from even poorer cities and probably even affordable cities. Are you really saying that a standard of living in Chhapra is better than or costlier than Kolkata? No, it's probably lesser in Chhapra, right? तो वहां का लोग यहाँ आएगा. मगर ये प्राउड बंगाली इकोनॉमिस्ट बोल रहा है कि you see, it's such a great thing that we are the cheapest city, and no wonder people leave that cheapest beautiful city to go in 152% price rise city to work. Okay, again, Cuba's healthcare, people building rafts and sailing off to Florida. Itna badhiya healthcare hai. Bangladesh, okay, Bangladesh is a land of beautiful poetry and stuff. India is a land of rising income inequality and rising Hindu fascism. From which country are people running to which country? So this was evidenced in Singur, where land adjoining the Tata factory was sold at skyrocketing prices since it was viewed as an investment opportunity due to industrialization in the area. क्योंकि वहां पे कोई मदरचोद eminent domain का चुतियापा नहीं हुआ, वहां पे actual libertarianism काम कर गया. Whereas the same quality of land in the Tata field was taken at a lower price by the government. और बाबूज हमें बचाएंगे from evil capitalism because they don't have greed. Jevons believed that value depends on the wealth and inclinations of prospective buyers, which is why the prospective buyers and the sellers are the only ones should be allowed in the conversation, not the third party non-stakeholder. This too is evident in Singur, as the value of land appreciated and depreciated depending on the eagerness of buyers to invest in an industrializing town, concepts which are absolutely foreign to 99% of Bengalis, including the Hindutwadi socialists. Friedrich von Weiser located value not in utility but in want, since even useful things like water and iron are valued lower than diamonds. Ronald Coase stated that if buyers and sellers are adequately informed is a bit too much of a demand, I think. The negotiated monetary price represents the true value. In Singur, West Bengal, government failed to adequately inform or negotiate with parties during land acquisition, which also fueled the protests. The next section studies the demand for industry in Singur rising a decade after the protests. The question of industry in rural West Bengal. Oh, I see. I am very sorry. Yeah, I'll keep this in mind. The present demand for industry in Singur has revived from the residues of resistance against industry in the past. Despite the historical fluctuations in outcomes of industrialization, the demand for it exists because West Bengal already had an affluent economy in the pre-communist era. What a surprise. pride about the bygone era of industrialization, and disillusionment about the post-communist era's deindustrialization inform today's demand for industry. The lost era of industrialization in West Bengal works as an inspiration as the state seeks to rise out of its ashes and return to its former state of affluence. Since agricultural incomes are insufficient, even farmers who prefer agriculture support industrialization, hoping for jobs or a market. Even if industry is not inherently positive, it is seen as the plausible route to economic revival since West Bengal already experienced the benefits of industrial economy in the past. The CPIM has also attempted to revive itself through the narrative of demand for industry. Prithvi Ghosh, a local CPIM leader, commented, quote, "We were ended here, so let us begin from here." Aha, poetry. His comment was about the Farmers' Rally of 2018, which he presented as an attempt at revival using pro-industry rhetoric. Regardless of participation in this rally, both partisan interests and ordinary citizens shared the realization of the need for industry. With the demand for industry, relationships between peasants and industrial regimes metamorphose. Marginal farmers cannot profit sufficiently as they remain agricultural laborers with a small plot for subsistence farming. As poverty increases with smaller land holdings, we can blame it on Adani, they incur losses and debts, rising income inequality. West Bengal's farmers suffered this fate since CPIM's land redistribution created smaller land holdings and sustained rural poverty. Today's Singur's farmers feel disillusioned with the past and regret the lost potential for the future. The desire for industrialization propelled by insecurity of agricultural income is now harnessed by all political parties, but land acquisition remains controversial. Since the land acquisition in Singur was an act of primitive accumulation, the next section discusses this concept. Nice. Primitive accumulation and the dynamic peasantry. Audrey Trashcan, why do you think informed is a little too much? Because in the garb of them being uneducated, that's when third-party stakeholders come in. See, we are not here to educate you, or we are not here to colonize your minds. We are not here to speak on your behalf. We are just explaining to you that you are not informed on these decisions on your own. You see, you are too much of a dumb fuck. I am going to educate you now because I have a degree in developmental economics from Harvard, even though I understand nothing of economics in real life. I'm going to educate you so you can negotiate better with Tata, which is never going to happen. And that argument of not being educated enough can be applied to each and every domain in life again, which is not applied to most domains in life, which is why most things even today function. Think of the music industry again. How is the society, let's say, sure that I am negotiating with full knowledge and full, let's say, information on behalf of the client or the film producer who is hiring me? I don't know that. I am only negotiating the price which I think is fair for me, or the max price under which I can't go, okay, or the minimum price under which I can't go. That is the end of and beginning of any negotiation in reality, unless it's distorted by third-party non-stakeholders. Primitive accumulation and the dynamic peasantry. Marx defines primitive accumulation as the historical process of separating the producer from his land and means of production. This dispossessed producer is absorbed in the capitalist system as a free wage laborer. However, this analysis is limited to early industrial Europe, where states managed dispossessed populations through emigration, conscription, and so on. Sanyal 2007. ये कौन से सन्याल है? Sanyal 2007, तो his first book was in 2008. Might be this one only. Might be Hamare Sanyal. In India, primitive accumulation is not only a precursor to capitalist production, but an ongoing feature of it. As said by DeCosta and Chakraborty. Kollan Shannal, okay, unfortunately. Kollan Shannal's concept of need economy explicates the excluded space where dispossessed people are relegated. The dispossessed unregistered sharecroppers of Singur exemplify this concept of need economy, as they were neglected after being dispossessed. Even today, when primitive accumulation is accompanied by its reversal through the welfare state, these unregistered sharecroppers were deprived despite being under a leftist regime. Poor, landless, lower caste, and often illiterate, these sharecroppers belong to the margins of rural society. Illiterate because of CPIM's brilliant education system, which prevented rise of income inequality. Sharecropper, marginal, rural. However, their marginalized status constitutes a political force. that gave formidable support to the Singur resistance. These sharecroppers exemplify Partho Chatterjee's concept of political society, as they are simultaneously socio-economically marginalized yet politically organized, which is of course the main problem with Indian politics. If being informed was a right and entitlement, it could help to keep the third party lot away. Absolutely not. If being informed was a right, we would have a ministry for informing them, and that would go on an endless tirade of trying to inform them, create seminars and talks, and let's say Doordarshan ka bullshit audio visuals, etc. They are supposed to be informed through their education system, which is fucked. If even being informed is up to us, it's unfair to the consumer. It's absolutely up to the seller of the services, seller of the land, and the buyer as well. But in this case, in the Singur case, of course, in the farmers being educated and stuff, since that's such an infinite pool of bureaucracy, we can't even bring up the idea of consumers being informed and stuff. But consumers should have some common sense, of course. But the consumers are not in question here, right? So the dispossessed, unregistered sharecroppers of Singur exemplify this concept of need economy. Yeah, ye ho gaya. While land struggle and primitive accumulation are theoretically linked with class conflict, the Singur resistance and land struggle united classes. Landowning farmers, landless sharecroppers, and agricultural laborers all protested together, displaying a solidarity that cut across economic strata to unite on common political ground, all of which were fooled by third-party non-stakeholders who decided, let's inform them better. Underlying caste divisions continued even within its solidarity, as decisions were usually taken by wealthier, landowning, dominant caste leaders. But the conflict was between farmers and industrialists allied with the state, not within the peasantry itself. Protesters viewed the resistance not as a class struggle, but as a hitherto unimaginable political movement to displace CPIM and uplift TMC. Urban activists, academics, political oppositions, landowning farmers, sharecroppers, and laborers united across caste, class, or location, but after the fueling of the fire by the non-stakeholder third parties. In West Bengal, a class war never existed in the agrarian community since various agrarian classes cooperated for production. CPIM rural cadres were also unable to build a class struggle since it lacked organic basis. A decade after the resistance, though sharecroppers initially defended their right to farm, they admitted that they are farmers not out of choice but out of structural and hereditary compulsion, since they lack other skills. You see, this is how casteism was enforced and solidified by CPIM. Their worldview consists of contradictory orientations. They dynamically politically organized the resistance a decade ago. It was to reproduce their static socioeconomic conditions, yet they also seek to transcend their static conditions for the next generation. This resistance also had a latent dynamic goal, to change the regime. The dynamic aspect of peasantry is also evident in their oscillations between the back and forths between the two extremes of resisting and demanding industry. Thus, orientations of the peasantry undergo dynamic changes depending on political economic conditions and more on the demands of the third-party non-stakeholder intellectuals from the city who fool them. A decade after resistance, divergent orientations have converged into a ubiquitous demand, a demand for income, which manifests as a demand for industrialization as a source of employment or market. The demand for industrialization embodies socio-economic value regardless of political support, ubiquitously appealing to all. The next section explores the farmers' rally that attempted to capitalize on this demand. CPIM's Farmers Rally in 2018. The primary demand of CPIM's Farmers Rally was industry and jobs, which was also the aim with which the CPIM claimed to bring TML, the Tata factory, to Singur. CPIM cadres projected this rally as a symbolic attempt at political revival, also claiming that TML had made Singur prosperous even before it was fully functional. Yes, because there was no eminent domain going on. There was actual libertarianism going on. Ironically, although a lot of that land was bought by big leaders of all the parties, actually. Ironically, CPIM itself had deindustrialized West Bengal over the years. The realization of the need for industry came late and with state coercion, to which dispossessed people reacted. Okay, and when this deindustrialization was going on, when people were being asked to farm, or when people were losing their industry jobs, what kind of information and education had gone on? Were they educated enough to join a union buzz's protest? Were they educated enough to support CPIM in kicking out industry? No, they were not. They were educated back then, gullible under the narratives of educated, highly educated third-party non-stakeholders from the cities, and they are now. So they are not going to be educated ever unless the education system changes. CPIM simply did not listen to people. Yes, they should have listened and not done the factory. They used brute force, which gave protesters the space to protest legitimately. Yes, which had not happened until 2006. Unfortunately, the protests were allowed to increase. High Court had declared the protests illegal, but Buddhadev Bhattacharya was too meek on the protests. You see, nice Buddhadev Agarwal. Such people cannot run the administration efficiently, okay? ये कौन लिख रहा है भाई? Prithvi Ghosh? Oh, Prithvi Ghosh. He's from CPIM only. What a dumb fuck. He's on one hand saying that CPIM was being too brute. On the other hand, he's saying that he was too lenient. एक ही साथ दो हो रहा था, ठीक है? ज्यादा जोर अप्लाई कर दिया, इनफ जोर अप्लाई नहीं किया. तो अब कुछ ना कुछ अपोलॉजी देना है, कूल बनना है अभी के देखो हमसे गलती हुआ था, ये एस्टैब्लिश करना है, उसके लिए जो दिमाग में आ रहा है बोल रहा है. He should have simply followed the court order and uprooted the protests. Yes, and that could have happened without brute force, right? अपर्णा सेन को डंडा मारते तुम जाके. कौन सा कोर्ट का बात सुन के ये कोई करता? He should have simply followed, but that was not done, and once the protests were allowed to take root, there was no turning back. Every single day there were protests. I was deeply pained when the managing director of TML, Tata Factory, showed me that several young people whom I had recommended for training were also protesting. all this was happening organically as a fight against CPIM. They were reaping benefits from both sides. Yes, you see, people are assholes. Macro level, humanity is generally assholes. Individual level, people are mostly good. Like if you crash your bike or if you fall down on the street, and people will come to help you and stuff. But macro level, people are harami, and that's how we survive. Although such ability to simultaneously balance allegiances to opposite political forces appears incredible, it can be understood through Bourdieu's concept of feel for the game. Feel for the game has been explained in the following way. Recall and think of losing ourselves in the play of a game in such a way that no matter how individualistically we struggle, we are also constantly aware of being part of something larger, not just a team, but the game itself. Social life is like this, Bourdieu suggested, except that the stakes are bigger. It requires constant improvisation, not just following rules, but having a sense of the game, a sense of how to play. This is a social sense, a constant awareness of and responsiveness to the play of one's opponent and teammates. In Singur, this concept explains why several people had shifted political allegiances long before the regime changed, aligning with the political future incumbent party. सब अपने अपने घर settle करने लग गए. This shift was not ideological but pragmatic. Oh, I see, pragmatism works. Ideological, Sanatan values, ideology, even loyalty to a party doesn't work. Pragmatism works. Oh, so you mean incentives work? What a surprise. Done to secure one's political future. While initial protesters sought to protect their agrarian lifestyle, those who shifted allegiances later did so for pragmatic reasons. This shift is attributable to people's feel for the game, which made them calculate the potential change in regime long before it happened. An interview with Sonali Sadhuka, the niece of a local CPIM leader, revealed a peculiarly elitist perspective. Regarding the resistance, she said, outsiders brainwashed farmers that TML, the Tata Factory, deprived them. But now they realize they have made the mistake of pushing the Tatas out. Now they must beg for dole-outs. All of a sudden, ye libertarian ban gayi hai. Ka baap re. Most people in Gopalnagar West are scheduled caste sharecroppers and laborers. They are illiterate, which is... Oh, even though her party was in power for 30 years. They're illiterate, which is why it was easy to brainwash them. तो भोसड़ी कब तक तुम क्या कर रहे थे? Further, people were swept up in the wave of protests. Yeah, genius. Sonali's perspective attributed the protests of 2006 to 2008 to the illiteracy, implying foolishness of lower caste, landless, unregistered sharecroppers in Singur, saying their illiteracy made them vulnerable to TMC's manipulations. But when we were manipulating them, at that very point, they were illiterate geniuses. Right when TMC manipulated them, they became foolish illiterate people. In-depth interviews with these sharecroppers, however, revealed that their actions did not result from manipulations, but from structural compulsions and circumspect calculations. Sharecroppers were not dissociating themselves from CPIM's rally in 2018 because they are not literate enough to gauge its importance. They even acknowledged the need for industry, but they nonetheless opposed CPIM, although it was demanding industry. The sharecroppers were exercising a conscious political choice. क्योंकि भाई डंडे पड़ जाएंगे. When they resisted Tata Factory too, they had weighed their options. They were not manipulated because of their illiteracy, except by the third parties, non-stakeholders, who were just better manipulators. Rather, they chose to oppose a project which attacked their livelihood. Now, when sharecroppers acknowledge the need for industry, they consciously do so without supporting CPIM, because नहीं तो CPIM गाड़ में तृणमूल गाड़ में डंडा दे देगा. For them, industry is relevant, but guard is more important. Because it could industry is relevant because it could create a market for their agricultural produce. It had no connection with CPIM. They distinguished between their political affiliations and economic needs, even if the two were conflated by political leaders. Sharecroppers had resisted TML, Tata Factory, not because they were illiterate and manipulated, but because they realized that being unregistered, they were not eligible for compensation and would thus be deprived. And this argument does not make sense because similar unfair things had been happening with them for the last 30 years. How did their brains all of a sudden get genius enough to prevent manipulation for the first time in 2006? That's my question. Doyaboti Roy, yes, in dialogue with Dipankar Gupta, argues that contrary to Gupta's assertions, peasants in Singur do not wish to move out of agriculture. This article argues that Roy is referring primarily to unregistered sharecroppers who are not entitled to compensation, or farmers who could lose significantly from the land acquisition. Landowners who could gain from the compensation had sold their lands in the beginning itself. A decade later, even those who had resisted industry are changing their perspective. The next section explores the theoretical scope of the agrarian moral economy in this context. हमारा थोड़ा 10-15 मिनट लेट होगा अगले लाइव स्ट्रीम शुरू होने में. Subsistence ethic and moral economy, the unregistered sharecropper. Operation Borga, the radical reform to change agrarian relations of produce, was unevenly implemented, which left several sharecroppers unregistered, while mostly supporters of the party were registered. Even the conditions of registered sharecroppers deteriorated, since they were entitled to 75% of the produce, landlords were not obligated to contribute to the input costs anymore. Lol. Thus, despite increased agricultural production in the 1980s, rural poverty remained in West Bengal because sharecroppers remained impoverished due to input costs. The unregistered sharecroppers protested vehemently because they were most exposed to marginalization, starvation, and loss of livelihood. And all this happened because they were not manipulated at all. James Scott has discussed the importance of technical and social arrangements in peasant society that safeguard even the poorest peasants from starvation in case of famines. These safeguards constitute the subsistence ethic, which underpins agrarian moral economy and ensures survival of peasant society. Thus, when subsistence ethic is compromised, making peasants vulnerable to starvation, it fuels rebellions. Exploitation does not lead to rebellions, but the threat of starvation and absolute destitution that is threat to subsistence ethic. Unregistered sharecroppers of Singur exemplify this concept. While landowners and registered sharecroppers were entitled to compensation, unregistered sharecroppers who had neither ownership nor tenancy rights over the acquired land were denied compensation completely. Although they cultivated other lands, losing the land acquired for Tata implied losing a significant section of their income. Thus, and you could not get a job in the Tata factory. I see. Thus, unregistered sharecroppers felt that the land acquisition for Tata was an attack on their subsistence. Naturally, this fueled their protests. Yes, without any manipulation from third-party non-stakeholders. Here, the attack on the subsistence ethic was not caused by famines or market fluctuations, but by a regime which reneged on its political commitments, which the regime had been doing for 30 years. A decade later, however, unregistered sharecroppers who had opposed land acquisition for industry now support any scope for industrialization on that same land, but the law and order is fucked so brutally these days that no one wants to industrialize, even though it's the most affordable city 1 hour away from Singur. The following sections discuss the factors which engendered this support for industrialization. Infertile lands and the gamble of agriculture. Though the Supreme Court in 2016 had ordered for the Tata land to be returned, जो अमाउंट बोला है इंटरेस्ट के साथ वापस देना पड़ेगा वेस्ट बंगाल गवर्नमेंट को, वो भाई ऑलमोस्ट लाइक इट्स सम इंसेन अमाउंट. आई थिंक इट्स बिगर देन द जीडीपी ऑफ वेस्ट बंगाल जो अमाउंट वापस देना पड़ेगा. Fertility of this land was already lost due to Tata's constructions. The infertility of this land includes construction debris, disrupted surface of the land, large metal rods drilled into the land, which obstruct farmers' work, changes in soil health, and so on. As noted before, the demand for industry in Singur is ubiquitous, but particularly for the Tata land, it is due to its current infertility. The changes in soil health have thus impacted people's socio-economic orientations. And Nirupam Sen, who was the industry minister back then, who was allegedly one of the people who killed the Josh family during the, I don't know where it occurred. Can anyone remind me of the name of the place where that Josh family massacre had happened? So where CPIM party men allegedly fed blood-soaked rice of the sons to the mother. So that Nirupam Sen at least came up with one sensible sentence that, what's the point of protesting now? The land is beyond fucked. You can't do agriculture on this anymore. That's how he used to talk. So at least listen to this argument. No, we are beyond manipulation, bro. So we are so beyond manipulation that we are going to think of doing agriculture on a land that's beyond agriculture now. The changes in soil health have thus impacted people's socio-economic orientations, I see. The current infertility of the land is less due to agricultural practices and more due to construction debris and the aborted industrialization. Since the land acquired was almost 1,000 acres, the land quality varied. While some areas were mostly flooded throughout the year, other areas were cultivable. It was largely agricultural land, and since agriculture was the primary livelihood of the people who worked on that land, they had an obligation to ensure soil health and keep the land fertile. Thus, its later infertility was primarily due to construction debris rather than farming practices. Yes, of course. Right. Thank you for reminding. Shai Badi massacre. So, the landless, lower caste, unregistered sharecroppers from Gopalnagar West revealed that though they were aware of this infertility a decade ago, they nonetheless demanded the land's return because the protests had raised a wave which went beyond agrarian interests and acquired a partisan color and went beyond my self-interest as well. You see, because I was not manipulated at all. Today, when that wave of collective effervescence has subsided through the tempering of 10 years, these sharecroppers have changed their views. तो भोसरी के ये है लोगों का बुद्धि, और हमारे फालतू के रेनेसावादी और एनलाइटनमेंटेडवादी आके इंडिविजुअलिज्म मरवाएंगे सिर्फ हिंदुत्ववादियों के साथ. हाँ, तब इंडिविजुअलिज्म मरवा रहे हैं लोग और फॉलो करना है हमको. और मीनवाइल ये हो रहा है वहां पे कि नहीं, हम मैनिपुलेटेड भी नहीं है, मेरा खुद का लॉस भी हो, हम वहां पे एग्रीकल्चर कर भी ना पाए, फिर भी एक जो मजा, एक जो वाइब आ रहा है यहाँ पे प्रोटेस्ट पे, उसमें हमको जाना है भोसरी के. बट आई एम नॉट मैनिपुलेटेड. I just like a bee without a hive and a man without a tribe can't live, so I'll just join the protest. Mohendra Malik, one such sharecropper, commented, if anyone constructs a factory there now, farmers will readily give the Tata land. No one will protest because we're not manipulated. Even people who had protested a decade ago want industry on the Tata land since it's no longer fertile and fertility cannot be restored in it, realistically speaking. But I just didn't listen to Nirupam fucking Shen when he said it. The entire factory was built, so breaking that will naturally ruin the land. Yes. Mohendra was accompanied by several sharecroppers, among whom was Shotendra Malik, and they're supposed to be Mollik, a local TMC leader in Gopalnagar West. Shotendra is a landless, lower caste sharecropper with a dedicated following regardless of his partisan affiliations. He's organically embedded within the population, a son of the soil. Matir Manush. His power comes from the social capital among his community of followers, nice, who are also his long-term acquaintances. Emotional attachments solidify his support base. Inko sikayenge hum individualism. He organizes his followers for political action whenever required. Shotendra too asserted the need for protests a decade ago, while also admitting that the fruit of those protests, namely the return of land to its original owners, is futile now. You see, I was not manipulated at all. Although he defends his role in the protests, because he was not manipulated, because he believes CPIM's atrocities had become intolerable and needed a political opposition, therefore I fucked my agricultural land. He now feels that departure of Tata was a loss for Singur, but I stood up for the rest of Bengal's operations under CPIM, even by prioritizing the loss for Singur. What genius 4D chess! I had organized people to resist Tatas because I had thought they would ruin us. But now I realize if Tatas would have stayed, it would have benefited us. You see, I was not manipulated before. I would not have been employed in the factory, but maybe my children could have been employed there. Oh, libertarianism works. Oh, trickle-down works. A local resident needn't benefit through direct employment. Oh, I was fooled by non-stakeholder third parties from the city who are Brahman, Boidos and Kaistos. I could have sold my crops at a better price. I see. A factory means workers, which means consumers. It would have... এখন সবাই থমাস ওয়েল হয়ে গেছে দেখছি. A factory means workers, which means consumers. It would have been a market for my produce. Dumb fucks. While sharecroppers express such hope for a market, they cannot legally sell paddy and specific grains outside the APMC. However, they hope to profit from selling vegetables and other crops in the market. This profit is possible through a larger customer base, which industrialization provides in the vicinity, which also produces transport costs. Since industry implies tangible possibilities of such farmers' markets, sharecroppers support it regardless of employment possibilities. To them, agriculture and industry mutually benefited each other. This challenges the agrarian question by showing how the two modes of production simultaneously coexist and reinforce each other rather than unidirectionally transitioning from one to the other. Unprofitability of agriculture also causes the demand for industrialization. Dipankar Gupta analyzes how the declining village economy compels people to detach from agriculture, even if they remain in rural areas. Unpredictability of nature and expensive agricultural inputs makes agriculture a risky gamble. Balaram Shamanto, a landowning farmer from a dominant caste family in Shamantapara or Shamantapara. So you see, it's a caste-based name of a village again. People were only Shamantos used to live at some point. Now, of course, there will be different people in different neighborhoods. So, from a dominant caste family in Shamantapara, Gopal Nagar said, "My land is in a terrible state. Fertilizer and labor costs have increased. Produced sale price has decreased. So agriculture is not profitable. Because of lack of labor, some crops are wasted in great quantities. Even if we get labor, they demand high wages. Kahe bosri ke? I can never recover the cost of that labor, so we let our crops go waste." What genius collection of bandits. It's a twin tower building of bandits that we have in our society. Even if we get labor, they demand high wages. I can never recover the cost of that labor, so we let our crops go to waste. And meanwhile, dumb fucking commies in their graduation classes think that hunger is caused or food wastage is caused by evil capitalism or uh, by the nature of economics in general. Okay, it's just that we are not feeding our farmers enough. The moment the price of potatoes increases even slightly, we are told not to increase the price. But meanwhile, we have already invested a lot of money in labor, water, fertilizer, so we cannot profit. So instead, I go join the processions against farm labor laws because I'm not money manipulated at all. Besides infertility of the land, a change in attitude towards rural political economy influences today's demand for industry. Since West Bengal was starved of industry for 3 decades, this demand has always existed. Even during the Singur resistance, anti-industry rhetoric was avoided. However, a decade ago, despite all these factors, the resistance against industry succeeded because the need for political change through TMC's defiance took precedence over long-term economic needs. Yeah, right. And people let go of their personal profits just to chill and hang out with the Trinamool processions. Either they were manipulated or they were too stupid to be manipulated, and so they let go of their profits and joined the vibes of the protests. The resistance became a vortex, drawing support across geopolitical and economic differences. The need to defeat the invincible communist regime became a clarion call. TMC defiantly fueled this zeal and became a viable political alternative for the first time, helped by RSS. Conjunction of political and economic demands. Ram Bera, whose family had willingly sold their land for Tata, expressed a sense of loss at Tata's departure, especially because he hoped to be employed there. The resistance was heightened by the party. Some people allied with TMC despite taking compensation from the government. Despite understanding the need for industry, they joined the resistance for political advantage. Remember, the number of such people was 80%. 80% of farmers had consented to the factory happening. Okay, democracy, capitalism, libertarianism, economy, education, सब कुछ का भोसड़ा बना दिया था उस situation में. Despite understanding the need for industry, they joined the resistance for political advantage. I support industry, but I did not go for the CPIM rally. It is subdued now. Oh, see, even he's too pissed off with CPIM now. Nice. In 2006 through 2008, everyone benefited from Tata because of increase in customer base. Many people got employed as janitors, laborers. We were entitled to bonuses, healthcare, provident fund. Ram's family were CPIM supporters, therefore it is natural for him to express such remorse. However, even sharecroppers affiliated to TMC expressed a similar support for industry. Although industry, market, and income were directly needed in West Bengal, a party that resisted it all won the state elections. Lol. This contradiction is explained through the factor of pragmatism. I disagree because pragmatism would have led them to look after their own profits. Okay, even if it's the 20% who did not see any profits in the near term, um, are we saying that 80% of the farmers in that same area did not know them at all, had no conversations with them that अरे गांडू बेच दे, हम वहीं पे नौकरी कर लेंगे या फिर कुछ ना कुछ और कर लेंगे, ये किसी ने नहीं बोला उस 20% को. So it was not even pragmatism, it was just plain and simple manipulation. This contradiction is explained through the factor of pragmatism. Despite the economic need for industry, the political need to defeat CPIM was prioritized. Singur shows how the electorate can prioritize needs and behave pragmatically even when their actions appear counterintuitive. The resistance was majorly due to political reasons, and yet the farmers harbored an economic motive behind their demand for industry. This demand existed for decades. However, the sharecroppers lacked non-agricultural skills, and therefore this demand was lukewarm among them. While sharecroppers resisted to protect themselves from destitution, the landed farmers were not averse to industry, but they did not want it on their own land. Lol. A group interview with political workers revealed these complexities. Amol Shah said, genuine local support came from sharecroppers. Sharecroppers are numerically higher. They knew Tata would deprive them, so they protested. The protests became an ego tussle. People became adamant about not giving their land. Also, when there are multiple siblings, the compensation is divided among all, which reduces the amount for each recipient. Pritam Bera said, the protests surrounding the land issue had always been political. People were tired of the 34-year-long left rule. Because CPIM was doing this, people opposed. The protesters gained a louder voice due to political support. Political support meaning manipulation and support from third-party non-stakeholders from the city. Thus, political and economic factors intermingled in influencing both the resistance and the demand for industry. These factors ranged from macro-political mass orientations to grassroots issues. Oh, just one page left for the paper. Issues of compensation. Insufficient compensation by CPIM had also propelled the protests, even though it was later revised. Remember, the people from that era who used to follow Bengal politics. Farmers who accepted compensation in lieu of land from CPIM government were categorized as willing, ichchuk chashi, and onichchuk chashi. Those who rejected compensation and joined the resistance were called unwilling, onichchuk. Unwilling farmers today feel a sense of loss, which indirectly translates to demand for industry. A decade later, they received the compensation from the Trinamool government, but without without inflation adjustments. Oh, what genius developmental economists Trinamool has in their fold. You see, Bangla Pakho, our genius economist, Abhijit Banerjee, who is opening a lab in Uttar Pradesh, the Bimaru state, has not said anything to Mamata Banerjee in this context. Lol. बिना इन्फ्लेशन एडजस्ट करके 10 साल पहले का कॉम्पेंसेशन आज दे दिया हाथ में. In 2016, Supreme Court ordered for the Tata land to be returned to the original owners. By then, willing farmers had invested their compensation for 10 years and they got their lands back, albeit in an infertile state. Lol. Unwilling farmers, onichchuk chashis, received the compensation a decade later without inflation adjustments and got their lands back in an infertile state. Thus, they feel deprived and regret their participation in the resistance. Oh. Anik Ghosh, an unwilling farmer, said, willing farmers got both money and land. What about us? What is the point of getting the same amount of money 10 years later? Yeah, go join the next farmers' protest. Because of our resistance, the willing farmers got their land back too. In 2006 through 8, we had neither the land nor money. It was difficult to manage household expenses and children's education costs. Yes, they were getting very educated, judging from your economics knowledge. I have 3-4 bighas of land. I could have earned 9 lakhs. By now that 9 lakhs could have become 18 lakhs. Then what is the point of 2,000 rupees and rice? The regret at their loss is multi-layered, affecting their domestic life deeply. The trauma of that loss makes them regret the resistance, which translates to a desire for industrialization on the land. The demand for industrialization appears due to regret at the loss of the potential to enhance their financial position. Erstwhile protesters also resent the fact that farmers are still getting court notices for their participation in the resistance. Lol. सब चारों ओर से अपने आप को गड्ढे में डाल दिया. It was expected that during TMC's regime, these court cases which were filed by CPIM workers would stop. However, continuing court notices cause resentment against Trinamool, which makes them regret their participation in the resistance. Regardless of socio-political locations, people agreed on increasing unprofitability of agriculture, thus generating a need for industry. While some see industry as an alternative to agriculture, some see it as a supplement to agriculture, a source of a market. Regret about the departure of Tata Factory emerged from across the political spectrum. The initial euphoria of victory in using a dynamic political tool to displace a formidable industrial project and overthrow a deeply entrenched political regime has now been replaced with a regret over the static reproduction of their socio-political existence. By revisiting Singur a decade after the resistance, this study traces the trajectory of the field to show how it engages with the agrarian question and debates on industrialization in a rural atmosphere that has become a paradoxical concoction of disillusionment, regret, and resilient hope. Now, conclusion, and then we begin the 7:30 wala live stream with Mystery Sociologist. Conclusion. This article studies the relevance of the demand for industry as a tool for political action. This empirical study conducted in Singur, West Bengal, reveals that there exists a demand for industry in rural Singur, regardless of partisan and or occupational divisions. It uses narratives from Singur to critically explore the classical agrarian question. This article demonstrates that the demand for industry is generated by agrarian economic insecurities rather than agricultural surplus, and that industrialization boosts agricultural growth by increasing the consumer base. This article also interrogates the agrarian question of transition by revealing mutually reinforcing coexistence of agriculture and industry rather than unilateral transition. In Singur, CPIM had organized a farmers' rally that demanded industry. Among the farmers who are not supporters of CPIM, however, this rally was of little relevance. Nonetheless, what did resonate across the population was the demand for industry and market. Agrarian populations demand industry in the hope that it would create an immediate market for their produce, while the non-agrarian people hope for employment. The demand for industry thus rises from a site of its own demise in Singur. While there have been other studies on Singur, the uniqueness of this article lies in the fact that it revisits the field a decade after the protests and reveals the significant political and economic changes in the trajectory of the field. This article captures the socio-economic and political residue that remains long after the effervescence of the resistance has dissipated. This residue is not inert, because it nurtures the seed of yet another change through its disillusionment of the past, its frustrations with the present, and its demand for industry as a hope for the future. Like the tortoise in Kung Fu Panda said, past is history, tomorrow is mystery, today is a gift. That's why it's called a present. So it's a brilliant paper because it conclusively shows that everyone wants industrialization and capitalism at the moment in West Bengal. Some people are sounding like Thomas Sowell's, who were 10 years back protesting against the industry. Except, of course, the one or two disagreements I have with the paper here, which is a bit of an infantilization and, let's say, rosy-eyed lens to look at the innocent, cute little villagers. That's all. Other than that, I don't have any problem with the paper. But the paper, what it does is, again, from a credentialed academic, Dr. Suchismita Dash, comes a paper which argues that everyone in the state currently wants industrialization. Yes, perfect. Cell, it's live right now and it's not going to live anymore. I'm closing down the live stream to begin the next one. Thank you for joining, guys. See you in the next live stream. Bye-bye. Good night. Thank you for joining this one.
श्रवरूढं महाभीमं गुणाद्रष्टाङ्गरप्रदम् अस्य युक्तं त्रिनेत्रं च कपालकर्णिकाकरां मुक्तकेशीं ललज्जयः पिबन्तीं रुधिरं चतुर्बाहु समायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत् चतुर्बाहु समायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत् काली काली महाकाली कालिके पापहारिणी धर्मर्थमोक्षदे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते धर्मर्थमोक्षदे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते काली काली